Hello, loyal viewers of the Game Time Decision podcast. It is me, Just Joe, back again with a new NBA Draft special podcast. Now, I just want to say, before I continue, that there has been discussions or lack thereof with former members of the network and podcast, and as it currently appears right now, I will have complete control of creative content coming out of the Game Time Decision podcast and Game Time Sports Network. We may have some guests coming on, hopefully some you know, some you might not know, but hopefully we'll just be providing good content for you guys. And just to let you know what this means is it'll be a little more lively, a little less regimented, and maybe a little more fun. Also worth noting that everyone who has been on the Game Time Sports Network, other than Pat Donnelly, has been accepted to college and will be attending, so we can maybe be a little bit more off-color and have a little bit more fun. Not saying we're going to be offensive or anything, but we might not be afraid to say words like damn on the podcast. So with that said, let's just get started. And I just have a lot of thoughts I really want to run through because this NBA offseason has just been so wacky, and it hasn't even officially started yet. Free agency hasn't started yet. The draft's tomorrow, and I just cannot wait to see what else unfolds. I mean, you have the Celtics, like, as always, in every rumor, in every discussion, and they make a big move, and we are just waiting to see what comes next. And yesterday, first thing I want to hit on is the two teams, both of whom the Celtics own their pick next year, depending on some protections. The Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets made a trade yesterday, with the Nets sending Brook Lopez in the 27th pick to Los Angeles for the albatross contract of Timofey Mozgov and 2015 number 2 pick D'Angelo Russell. And I just want to say, to anyone thinking that this trade makes the Nets better in the short term for 2018, which is all Celtics fans care about, no, it does not. Is it a good trade for the Nets, though? Absolutely. So I just want to first off start by saying that Brook Lopez, for everyone who wants to rag on him saying, no, he can't rebound, no, he can't stay healthy, the past 2 years, he's been the only guy getting the Nets their wins, as few as they've been. But the Nets still have won like 20-something games the past few years. This team is putrid. I've been on the record of saying that I don't think the Nets will be the worst team next year. I thought they could have contended for maybe the 8th seed, but at the very least be like the 5th or 6th worst team in the league. But their GM, I believe his name is Sean Marks, he is smart and he's building for the long run. And you know what he's just saying, all right, Celtics, I'm just going to give you your last pick, and then I'm going to do this the right way. Instead of rushing a rebuild and giving a bad contract to Serge Ibaka, a bad contract to JJ Redick, or a bad contract to any other veteran free agent who could even set them further back. So I think this really increases the value of the Nets pick. But on the other hand, I think this does decrease the value of the Lakers pick, which I do believe now will fall outside of the top 5. So you look at, not only do they acquire Brook Lopez, who in the short term for the 2018 season makes them a better team than just having D'Angelo Russell, especially since they have Lonzo Ball in all likelihood, as Adrian Wojnarowski pretty much confirmed. Lonzo Ball will be the Lakers' number 2 pick. So Russell's out, Ball in. I think for the first season right now, that's a wash. Ball could be better in the future, but as a rookie, I think they're about the same, different skill sets, but in terms of what they add in terms of winning in 2018, about equal. But Brook Lopez over Timofey Mozgov is definitely an upgrade, and this also opens the door for the Lakers to trade for Paul George this year. And I know a lot of people are saying, why would they give up any assets for Paul George when he's just going to come in 2018? Well, the reason why you do that is because, let's say, the Lakers don't try to trade for Paul George, and the Celtics do, or the Cavaliers do, or Houston does, or any other team in contention does. They trade for Paul George. Let's say the Celtics, if they can sign Gordon Hayward, make a draft pick, and trade for Paul George, make it to the finals, and give Golden State, they're not going to give Golden State a run, but let's just say they make it to the finals. Will Paul George turn down less money on a better team just because he loves LA and the glitz and glam and it's home? Who knows? The Lakers should not risk losing out on a franchise player when they can get him for diminished value. From what I heard, the offer the Lakers are offering Indiana is the 28th pick, Julius Randle, and Jordan Clarkson. and Indiana has said no, they want a higher pick. They're pushing for number 2. In this case, I believe Indiana will fold because at least if you get Randall and Clarkson, they're 2 young players who can average 15 points a game. And, I mean, the 28th pick, it is what it is. It's better than losing him for nothing. And I think teams will be wary, other than the Cavaliers. I don't think any other team will try to deal for George. So that's pretty much what Indiana will get. And I think it's a win-win for both sides because Indiana can start a rebuild and Paul George can be where he's meant to be in LA. And now that, pairing Paul George with Brook Lopez, that team might be a borderline playoff team. 8th, 9th seed. And then you get into next year how they're trying to clear max room. That's why they traded Mozgov to try to bring in LeBron. That's looking more and more likely to happen. I'll get to that later on the podcast. But now, I was very disappointed. If you heard the last podcast before the complete details of the 76ers Celtics trade was announced, I thought the Celtics would get 2 picks. And they only got 1. And the protections really bothered me. But I'm starting to think now, Ainge had the foresight to see that instead of just getting the Lakers' unprotected pick, he would forego the protection on the number 1 protection to have that bottom protection if the Lakers' pick falls outside the top 5, because he knew that Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson had something up their sleeve. So who knows? I really think that having that bottom protection was huge for the Celtics because looking at it now, that Lakers' pick could be in the teens. So, Ainge had to make some concessions, but as angry as I was at the time, that Lakers pick is starting to look less and less valuable, especially if the Lakers do indeed add Paul George for the 2017-18 season. Then that pick really is very diminished in value. And then you look at the Kings pick. And I'm still not sold that the Sixers will be good within the next few years because they are supremely talented with Simmons, Embiid, Fultz, Saric, even Okafor and Covington and TJ McConnell and all those guys. But injuries are a concern. You never know how those guys are going to mesh on the floor. Fultz is the only guy in that starting lineup under 6'10", which in theory is great, but also mean there could be a lot of injuries, a lot of awkwardness, a lot of problems on defense when you can't keep up with smaller guards on the defensive end. So you never know. So having the choice of the better of the Kings and 76ers pick really does help the Celtics. So, even though the Lakers are getting better, it makes me feel better about the trade because at least Ainge gave himself options because that Lakers pick just gets worse and worse by the day. And so now moving on to other news in the NBA, Jimmy Butler. So there's been so many conflicting reports within the past 48 hours. So first you hear the Cavs were trying to trade for him. David Griffin, before he left, was reportedly offering Kevin Love to Phoenix for the 4th pick, which then he would then flip to Chicago for Jimmy Butler, and Dan Gilbert kind of just put the kibosh on that and said, no, Griff, you're out. So, and now, fast forward, you hear, 36 hours ago, you're hearing Butler wants to force a trade to Cleveland, and the next day, he tells Cleveland, no, I don't want to go to you. And then you also hear Kyrie Irving saying that he will request a trade out of Cleveland if LeBron does leave. So that really has me thinking, I think there's and if you asked me this 2, 3, 4 days ago, if this would happen, I would say no way in hell. But I think there is now a better than 50% chance that LeBron James will not be a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers in 380 days from now. A little over a year. LeBron James will not be a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers, which is wild, but, I really think he's going to go to LA, and I think it's between the Lakers and the Clippers. I would lean towards the Lakers. A lot of people saying, you could go to the Clippers. Jerry West is there. He has a lot of admiration, but I think LeBron also sees a lot of himself in Jerry West. If you look at Jerry West back in the day, he was kind of that version of LeBron James, great, prolific player who made it to a ton of finals, but didn't win as much as he lost. So he could get the Banana Boat team together with Chris Paul, Dwayne Wade, and Carmelo Anthony. But all those guys are washed. Save for Chris Paul, who I think maybe has another 2-3 good years left. Wade, 18 points a game on 43% shooting. He's only going downhill from here. His knees are absolutely a mess. Carmelo Anthony, right now, he is just a glorified bench scorer. on a bad team, yeah, he can put up 20 points a game, but he's going to be taking a bunch of shots. His defense just keeps getting worse and worse. So if LeBron James really wants to compete for titles while he still has, I would say, 2 to 3 more prime years left, he wouldn't want to do that. But a situation in LA where he teams up with Paul George and they still have a ton of young assets. They'll still, let's just say they got rid of Russell. Let's say they do get rid of Randall and Clarkson. They'll still have Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram, who then they could then package in a trade for another all-star level player. So now let's say you're looking at LeBron James, Paul George, and whichever star comes up. Who knows who that's going to be? Jimmy Butler's obviously the name floating around, but you never know who. But Lakers the draw, and I really think that if I had to bet my money, I would bet my money on LeBron James being a Los Angeles Laker. And LeBron James is my favorite player. I think he is probably the best player I've ever seen, and I think he's the greatest player of all time. You can go back and forth between him and Magic, but I don't know what this does for his legacy, but if he can bring a championship back to the Lakers and still be like the lead guy and be the clear-cut best player, I don't think it can hurt him. I mean, maybe in the court of public opinion, it kind of will put a damper on him right now, but history will look back that LeBron James, if he does do this, will bring a championship to 3 teams and bring prominence back to probably the first or second greatest franchise in the history of the league after they've been quite putrid for 5 years. If LeBron James can do that, that would really be something. So, and now if you look at that, if the Cavaliers are unable to significantly transform their team, if their core in 2017-18 comes back as LeBron, Kyrie, Love, Tristan Thompson, and all the same cast of characters, maybe Korver goes and they bring in another bench guy, but if that's their core, I think that the Celtics, if they, with the right moves of either trading for Kristaps Porzingis, Jimmy Butler, Anthony Davis down the line, and signing a Blake Griffin, Gordon Hayward, not only can that team have a solid chance of beating the Cavaliers in the next season, but also that team can conceivably be the frontrunners and clear-cut favorite to win the Eastern Conference for the next 5 years, because Toronto's done as far as I'm concerned. Whether Kyle Lowry stays or goes, that team is a mess. They don't have any young assets. DeMar DeRozan's their only player, but if DeMar DeRozan is your best player, you're not beating the Celtics with hopefully 4 All-Stars. No chance. So you look at that, and you have Washington. How much can they really improve? They got rid of their first-round pick, and they're just going to be middlers for the next few years. So unless they can get a Kawhi Leonard or Giannis in the mid-rounds of the draft, which is highly, highly unlikely, they're not going to be that great either. They're going to be stuck maybe as making it to the Eastern Conference Finals as their ceiling with Wall and Beal. And no other team in the East other than Philly, but that's not another 5 years from now when they could potentially reach their ceiling. So I really think the Celtics, as much as people say their window is in 2021 to 2025 to win a championship, I disagree, because even though the Cleveland looks like an unstoppable force, Golden State A made them look like they were not only human but almost trash, and B, that team can be disassembled in the blink of an eye. Not to mention that the Golden State Warriors, they're not they could be done in a few years. I mean, all the players are still in their primes, but KD has an injury history. Same with Steph, and in a few years, I'm sure Klay Thompson will be tired of being the 4th guy on that team. He'll want to prove that, hey, I can be a lead player on a contending team. So maybe he'll be gone. And you never know how age and egos work. And I don't give that team more than 3 years of being together as it's currently constituted. Maybe they can still win a championship with just Steph and KD and role guys, but you never know. And also, the rest of the league is building towards 2021 to 2025. So by that time, Milwaukee with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jabari Parker and Chris Middleton, that team will be a force. Philly will conceivably be a force. The Lakers with a young talent and the ability to draw free agents will be a force. So you really need to... I really think the Celtics can strike a happy medium of preserving assets and going all in, quote-unquote. Gordon Hayward / Blake Griffin, whoever you acquire, they're not going to cost you any assets. That's just a max contract for 3 to 4 years. You don't have to give up all your assets for a player unless you're getting a franchise guy in Anthony Davis or Kristaps Porzingis, who are franchise guys in their early 20s. Other than that, you want Jimmy Butler, you just have to give up one high pick in Avery Bradley. I heard that the Celtics declined the 3rd overall pick straight up for Jimmy Butler, which is crazy because if you look back last year from different sources, you were hearing that the Celtics offered the 3rd pick, so Jaylen Brown. This year's right to swap with the Nets, which ended up being the number 1 overall pick, Bradley, Crowder, and Smart. That's not what the Celtics offered, sorry. That's what the Bulls wanted. But the Celtics did offer Jaylen Brown and Smart, Bradley, and Crowder are like 2 of those guys and a future pick. So I really think the Bulls did blow it, and now the Celtics kind of have them backed into a corner because they're just going to be wallowing in mediocrity. So the Celtics can pick up Jimmy Butler for cheap, and if they do, I would definitely lean more towards signing Blake Griffin instead of Gordon Hayward because even though Brad Stevens, Danny Ainge, kind of their philosophy is, positionless basketball, athletic wings who can play multiple positions, that's still way too much redundancy. If you add Jimmy Butler and you have Jaylen Brown and Josh Jackson and Jay Crowder, I know one of those guys would likely be gone, but you still have a lot of redundancy in that height range of 6'6" to 6'8", and guys who just are wing guys. So I think Blake Griffin kind of balances out your roster a little more. Pair him in the front court with Al Horford. And, Blake Griffin and Al Horford, that would be the best big man duo in terms of passing in the NBA. I mean, both are power forward / centers who average 5 assists a game. And Blake Griffin's improved on his shot, not quite a 3-point shooter, but can knock down that 18-foot jumper. Al Horford's become a very good 3-point shooter and mid-range jump shooter. So, I think that this is really the time for the Celtics to strike while the iron's hot. And you can build now and you can make it to the finals with a very good team. And who knows, just be around it. So you can build now and build for the future. So you'll still have top picks, but for the next, at least until next year or until 2019, which is crazy. And, if Danny Ainge plays his cards right, this really could be huge for the Celtics. And so next, I want to just talk about Kristaps Porzingis, who I think it's unfathomable that a 21-year-old or 20-year-old guy who's 7'3", shoots threes, can handle the ball, block shots, pretty much do everything you want, who's going into his 3rd year, would possibly be on the trade market. Anthony Davis, that's only speculation. You're not hearing any reports out of New Orleans that he's on the market. Karl Anthony Towns isn't on the market. I mean, these guys don't grow on trees. Nikola Jokic isn't on the market. So the fact that this guy is on the market, this really speaks to the ineptitude and turmoil that's going on within the New York Knicks organization from James Dolan on down to Phil Jackson. And honestly, I hear people saying, oh, well, I wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown and a pick for Kristaps Porzingis. Are you kidding me? You call up Phil Jackson, you ask him what he wants. As long as he's not asking for 4 picks in a player, if he wants Jaylen Brown, the 3rd pick, and another pick, you say, absolutely, I will drive them to the airport tomorrow. Are you kidding me? Kristaps Porzingis will be a top 5 player in the National Basketball Association within 5 years. Within 3 years, maybe, depending on the decline of LeBron, Steph, Curry, and all those guys. He will be a top 5 player, though. And the way the NBA is going, where you need guys who can stretch the floor at every position, where are you going to find a guy who's 7'3", who shoots 3-pointers at a 40% clip? He is the next Dirk Nowitzki, except maybe with more ball handling skills and fits in better into the modern NBA and a better defender. So this is wild. He's not quite Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is the guy you offer 4 picks and 4 players for. But other than that, I think Kristaps Porzingis, you're not going to get much better than that. So obviously, and I think Ainge recognizes that. And maybe he's reluctant to trade for Jimmy Butler, who's 27, reluctant to trade for Paul George, who's going to leave in all likelihood after a year. But you have a chance to get Kristaps Porzingis. He fits your timeline now and into the future. So that's definitely that's a guy I could definitely see the Celtics going after, and he's the reason why you have 7 first-round draft picks within the next 3 years. So there's that. And now on to the next topic of discussion, which will be the draft itself. If the Celtics do, in fact, keep their pick, who do I want them to take, and who will they take? So I still think that the Celtics will take Josh Jackson out of Kansas. Before the Celtics were in talks with Philadelphia about trading the number 1 pick for the 3rd pick, an anonymous executive in the league excuse me, said that the Celtics were taking Josh Jackson. He is the Celtics type player. Danny Ainge loves his athletic wings who can defend and just jump all over the court, and that's Danny Ainge's type of player, and that's who he's definitely going to take. And then you hear the day later that the Celtics are trading out of the top spot to go to the 3rd pick, where in pretty much every mock draft, that's where Josh Jackson is supposed to go. And so I think it only makes sense that Ainge would want that. So who knows? You've been hearing Tatum. Chad Ford today said that he likes Tatum. The Celtics like Tatum. They worked him out twice. And personally, I would take Tatum over Jackson only because the Celtics have enough guys who can play defense and can't shoot. I really think having an offensive-minded player like Jayson Tatum really would fit in well with the Celtics. I mean, you pretty much look at Josh Jackson. He's pretty much Jaylen Brown. I think he has 2 inches on Brown. He's a little bit lighter, a little bit skinnier, but pretty much athletic wing player who can defend, and jump shot still a work in progress. So if Ainge does like those players, who's going to stop him now? Like I said, positionless basketball, just athletes who can play basketball and defend mostly at least 3 positions, play 3 positions on the court. So Tatum definitely projects more as a 3/4, where Jackson can play the 2, more of a 3, but can also play the 4. But I think that Tatum would be very good on the Celtics, and who knows? I would definitely say that if I had to break it down into percentages, 40% Jackson, 30% Tatum, and then I would not rule out the Celtics taking out Jonathan Isaac because he's 6'10". His jump shot is kind of weird, not like Lonzo Ball weird, but he releases it from a low point, but he is 6'10", so he can get away with it. Almost like he shoots it with 2 hands, but he's being compared to a poor man's KD / Rashard Lewis. So that's a good stretch big who can put the ball on the floor. You hear these stories about guys who are point guards in high school, grow 8 inches, and now they're power forward / centers. So I would not rule out Jonathan Isaac. And he's projected to go anywhere from 5 to 8. So it's really a lot of mystery. And that's the great thing about the Celtics, and just the mystery of the Celtics is because you can pretty much fill in the draft board, but with the Celtics, you're still guessing. But also another thing, which, I keep going back and forth on this trade between the Celtics and 76ers, which is kind of confusing because you look and you see, well, the Celtics traded down, so they picked up more assets, and you look at this draft, so there are a lot of good guys, and why you can trade the consensus number 1 pick, but you can still get a guy who's very good. But I almost look at it in terms of the quarterback in the NFL analogy. Would you rather have 1 good quarterback or 3 mediocre ones? The saying is, if you have more than 1 quarterback, you have none. So why would you want to forgo the opportunity to get the clear-cut number 1 guy who, by all accounts, is projected to be the superstar of this draft? Chad Ford, since 2009, comes out with his player grading, and Markelle Fultz was listed in unanimous superstar potential. And there have only been like 10 guys since like 2009, and those guys have been like Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Davis, John Wall. I don't even think Kyrie Irving was was listed in that. So he's in pretty elite category. So unless Ainge, and this really comes down to it, Ainge does not see Markelle Fultz the way everybody else sees him. Because I know Ainge loves his assets, but I don't think that he would forego a potential James Harden just so we can pick up another pick, which is scary enough, could end up being a pick in the teens, depending on how protections go and how Philly does. So you still don't know with that, which is kind of mind-boggling. But, Ainge has earned enough leeway to be aggressive, and Ainge is in a situation that a lot of guys in the NBA aren't in, where they can make moves that kind of baffle everyone, and he doesn't have to worry about his job. He has complete job security because he's made such great moves throughout his tenure as Celtics GM. And so it's going to be really interesting. Draft tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. It's just, I don't know. It's a good time, but it's also a stressful time to be a Celtics fan. And, fool me once, every year for 3 years. I mean, you go down the list. Kevin Love, it was first, meeting with Rondo in Boston, supposedly coming to the Celtics. You hear Jimmy Butler every draft/trade deadline. Paul George recently came up this year. Back at the trade deadline, Andre Drummond and Isaiah Thomas were sending the googly eye emojis at each other. Blake Griffin. Now you're hearing Anthony Davis, Kristaps Porzingis. You go down the list, and, I really think this is the year for the Celtics to cash in their chips because of how vulnerable Cleveland looks and how many assets they do have, and also the contract status of Isaiah Thomas, who is going to be up at the end of this year, who will be making conservatively at least $25 million, and as much as if he makes another All-NBA team, he will be eligible for the designated player exception, I believe, which would be $40 million, which would be too much. But in all likelihood, Isaiah Thomas will be making $30 million. Avery Bradley will be making $20 million a year plus, whether it's from the Celtics or another team. Marcus Smart will be a restricted free agent, so he'll probably be here, but he'll be in the $10 to $15 million range even as a restricted free agent. So a lot of our cap flexibility will be going away. So, I mean, as much as you hear, well, this is the year the Celtics are going to cash in their chips, this is the year the Celtics will get rid of their assets from the Nets, but their assets have matured. Jaylen Brown, those Nets picks have started to become players. You can put faces to that pick. And the Nets picks are running out. Jaylen Brown was the first real Nets pick. I know James Young, but James Young completely has just shit the bed. So he's gone. Like, that was an asset wasted. You have Jaylen Brown. You had the number 1 pick, which is the best asset of all. Well, now you have your pick of Jackson, Tatum, for another team if they need a point guard, De'Aaron Fox, Jonathan Isaac, any of those guys. You have that. And then next year you have a Nets pick, which looks excellent. And then you have that weird Lakers/Kings protected mess, which could still end up netting you the 2nd, 3rd, 4th pick in a future draft. So that's what you have. You also have Avery Bradley, who was really developed into one of the better two-way players in this league, a guy who played like a borderline all-star this year. Jay Crowder, who's still under a good contract. So your assets have matured. You're not Isaiah Thomas, even though it looks like the Celtics are committing to him, his value's not going to be any higher. A second-team All-NBA player who averaged 29 points a game, who's making $6 million this year. Your assets have matured. So as long as I've been saying this, and I said this last year, and I said this the year before, it's time for the Celtics to go all in. Now really is the time for the Celtics to say, all right, we're going to completely punt the next 2-3 years, and we're just going to wait out Cleveland, which could just self-implode, and we're going to wait out Golden State. Or they can say, we're going to do what we can to win a title now and for the future. So, circumstances change, and, I really think the key is that LeBron James, in all likelihood, will be leaving Cleveland after this year. And I think that turn of events could push Danny Ainge to say, all right, even though we won't be favored in the finals, we probably have less than a 5 to 10% chance of winning the title, at least for the next 1, 2, 3 years. Is going to the finals worth giving up one of our 4 high picks? And I would say yes. So, build a San Antonio-like operation. You might not have Tim Duncan, but even I'm talking Tim Duncan's 30s, so his later years from, I would say, after 2007 when they won their last championship of that era, and so between 2008 to 2015, 14, up until now, where even though Duncan was going down, Parker was still good, but he wasn't obviously he couldn't be your best guy on a championship team. Same with Manu Ginobili. Just be around it, sign veterans, have a great operation, have a good international scouting program to bring in Tiago Splitters, to bring in all these guys, Patty Mills out of Australia. Have that good international scouting department, be able to make good picks in the late rounds where you can pick up your DeJounte Murrays and hit on a Kawhi Leonard if you want to trade your George Hill for that. Have that operation, have good scouting, have a good program, be at least in the Eastern Conference Finals in that conversation every year for 10 years. And who knows, you might, not going to say luck into a championship, but have that core ready. And you also have another high pick coming in next year, and you have your young guys. So this is really a time for the Celtics to enjoy having the best of both worlds. Because right now they're kind of middlers, even though they have all these assets. And then, if Anthony Davis comes around, then you have your prime Tim Duncan, and you have nothing to worry about. So, draft tomorrow night, ESPN, 7 o'clock. I'll be watching, and hopefully I'll be bringing another podcast to you this weekend or next week to talk about everything that's going on. And the Celtics could be a totally different team, or they could just be the same team with just adding Josh Jackson or Jayson Tatum. So thank you for listening to this 2017 Celtics Draft Podcast. I will catch you guys later, and next week there will be a free agency podcast where I talk about Blake Griffin, Gordon Hayward, and everything in between. So thank you, and have a great day.